Welcome and congratulations for finding your way to this masterclass on breathing, which really is a masterclass on life. So my name is Johannes. I'm the founder of Breathless, where we teach people how to breathe in every way, shape, or form. It took me to reach an absolute low point before I was actually open-minded enough to give breathwork an honest go. When I did though, this is about 5 years ago, it was like the lights turned on, and I since have been trying to work out what happened, right? How does something so simple, something that's so, that we take for granted so much, have such a profound effect on our state, on the way we feel, on the way we interact with the world around us. And eventually, through going on a bit of a journey myself, a quest around the world of learning from masters in the world of breathing, modern, ancient, and everything in between, I found some answers that I'd love to share with you in this simple overview today. So go ahead, sit back, we'll jump right into it. It's going to be fairly high paced and you might have to pause the video every now and then, but I recommend you take some notes, you let the experience come to you, and most of all, you give it an honest go with the amazing recordings that we've created for you. And we'll see you on the other side. Hey guys, Johannes here to talk to you today about a simple yet super powerful technique called the Boundless Breathwork Technique. About half a decade ago, these simple principles that I'm going to share with you today saved my life, changed my life, and since it has become my life. And I don't know about you, but I love the feeling, the experience, the emotional feel that I get from doing breathwork exercise, but I'm also a skeptical Dutch guy by nature. So I wanted some answers, wanted to know, how does it work? When do I practice it? And quite frankly, what the hell just happened to me right after waking up from such a beautiful, blissful experience and feeling a rush of energy go through my body and noticing the change in my life over time. So I've been on a quest for the last 5 years looking to find answers, and I found some really lousy ones, but I've also had this amazing opportunity to work with some of the modern masters of breathwork and marry the world of science, experience, and quite frankly, old and new. So I'm going to share with you today in a little presentation why I believe that the Boundless Breathwork Technique is the most powerful one available that you can start using today. So I'm going to walk you through a very brief overview of what the technique is, how we've laid it out, and then I'll talk you through why. And of course, in the practical session, there'll be more details on how to practice it. So if it kind of goes in one ear and out the other for right now, that's totally fine. In the beginning, we must understand that the way you are breathing right now, the way you breathe at rest, says a lot about you. It's like a blueprint that gives us a look under the hood, and we call this your tidal volume. And so the breathwork practice begins by you checking in with your breathing, your normal breathing, your breathing pattern at rest, right? And from there, we make a decision, we make a conscious choice to breathe in a particular way, right? And this is of course where the transformative power of breathing exercises begins. The fact that we have this choice to choose the way we breathe and to change our breathing and therefore get a different result as well. So in the first phase of the exercise, which we call natural breathing, your breathing pattern is the way it is, and that's reflective of the state that you are in. But then moving forward, we're going to make a choice to take some big, deep breaths in, preferably through the nose, using the diaphragm, expanding the ribs outwards, and just moving as much air through the lungs as we can is really what will do the job on a biochemical level. We call this super ventilation, okay? And what we're looking for are big, deep breaths in and passive, unforced exhalations. Choosing to do about 50 breaths or so before we hold the breath, and this is called a breath retention. We press the pause on our breathing and we do so on the exhalation. So nothing changes, it's a deep breath in and a passive exhale. And then a pause on number 50 or 40 or 60, who's counting, right? This pause will extend for as long as you can or as long as you feel comfortable. After which, when you feel a need to breathe, you're going to take a small sip of air just to release the pressure, right? Sips of air when the need arises. And we're looking for about 10 to 12 of these sips of air, which is what we call the ladder breath, right? Small sips of air to kind of press the release valve on the pressure that builds from holding our breath. And when you have a big lung full of air and you've stretched that moment out as long as you can, you release, you let your breathing stabilize, for a few breaths, and what you will find is that you now have a newly established tidal volume, or a whole new way of breathing, a whole new way of feeling, and a whole new way of being, which is what we call the flowing breath. So 5 phases to this breathing technique, starting with natural breathing, moving into a deeper, fuller breath with as much air as we can, then a breath hold on the exhalation, some ladder breaths when the pressure builds, extending that moment out as long as possible, and a release at the end, and you will experience a profound release. And we will also explain why and exactly how this all works. For starters, we're going to establish a couple of parameters. And number one is that whenever we look at oxygen, right, the vital force of life, we must also look at carbon dioxide, which is its counterpart. I think of it as its dance partner, right? And life in this atmosphere really is a delicate dance between oxygen and carbon dioxide, and it is not one without the other. So when we're breathing normally in our natural breathing volume, or our breathing at rest, or like our established pattern of breathing, oxygen and carbon dioxide maintain this beautiful, delicate balance, which is why we are alive and why our body runs on the energy the way that it does. When we choose our breathing pattern though, straight away we start to notice changes, right? And if we choose to breathe deeper, or we start to move more air through the lungs, the first thing that we'll observe is that the carbon dioxide levels will lower. And so we notice a significant drop in carbon dioxide levels. And the more you breathe, the more air you move, the longer you keep going with this deeper breathing pattern, the more carbon dioxide you will blow off. And what happens when you lose carbon dioxide is that oxygen will start binding and holding on really tightly to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells, which are its transporters, right? So the blood gets fully loaded with oxygen. And we can actually do simple measurements of this. It gets up to 100%, which sounds positive, but it isn't necessarily. What it really does is it stops being delivered into the tissues, the cells, where it is needed most, because we need carbon dioxide and oxygen to remain in balance. All good though, it's temporary and we're choosing to do so. So after doing this for about 50 big deep breaths, blowing off as much carbon dioxide as we can, right, and getting the oxygen, getting the blood fully loaded with vital oxygen, we then choose to hold our breath, and we do so on the exhalation. No force, right? And when you exhale, particularly at the belly, at the bottom of that exhale, it's where your heart has the most space, and it's where your nervous system is most relaxed, and you will notice that your heart rate after being accelerated starts to drop. And we're looking to extend this space, because what we've done is we've blown off carbon dioxide, remember? And this CO2, or carbon dioxide, the blue line here, is what causes the urge to breathe. So when we go into a breath hold without carbon dioxide, we can then quite naturally, effortlessly, timelessly extend that breath hold. And that's exactly what we're looking to do, because what will now happen is that because we're holding our breath for a significant period of time, and the blood is already full of oxygen, so the cells are already in what we call an anaerobic state, they're already without oxygen, right? Those oxygen levels will start to get into the system as soon as the carbon dioxide builds at this precious point where they meet, and it will then start to release. And when those oxygen levels start to go into circulation and they drop, they will plummet, inducing what we call a hypoxic response, or in normal terms, a drop in blood oxygen and tissue oxygen saturation. Now, this is a good thing. In fact, it's known as a technique called intermittent hypoxic training, right? Just like intermittent fasting, which would be temporarily reducing or abstaining from glucose levels, right? From food, from eating, we are doing so with breathing. We're choosing intermittently, temporarily to hold our breath and to lower the oxygen levels available in the system. Now, since the 1960s, this has been studied extensively, right? We all know about training at altitude, where people will choose to go to altitude temporarily, right? And train, and then they come back and they've got more oxygen carrying capacity and their performance increases. But we also know from studies at altitude that people's health improves in a selection, in myriad ways. So we are essentially bringing the mountain to you by using this little hack. And all it is blow off as much carbon dioxide as you can. Hold your breath and stay relaxed on the bottom of the exhale. Very important. The relaxation will allow you to extend that moment. Then go into what is known as a hypoxic state. And you can measure this by using a simple pulse oximetry device, which will give you two readings. One is your heart rate and the other one is the blood oxygen saturation. And what you'll notice is that when you start over breathing, that will go up to 100% because it is fully bound to the blood. And then when you hold your breath and you reach this critical point, it will start dropping and dropping and dropping. And initially it might not drop very far, but with practice, you'll be able to drop it below 90% saturation and then below 85% saturation, which is as if you're climbing a 3,000 meter mountain, right? And over time, you can even go lower and lower and lower. It should be noted that these become fairly inaccurate, below 70%. And we're also not looking to go as low as possible. You can actually drop your blood oxygen saturation down to 60% or 55%, which is the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. But extreme or more is not necessarily better. We're looking for a sustained, lower hold with blood oxygen saturation. And the way we establish that, so bear with me here, is that when the carbon dioxide levels start to build and build and build again, which happens throughout the middle of the breath hold, we reach what is known as our breaking point, right? And this is like our tolerance level to carbon dioxide, and our body will start to, through the nervous system, have these involuntary spasms, and the pressure will build and it will get quite uncomfortable, right? Carbon dioxide reacts to every single cell in the human body, including quite a few in the brain. And so your body will be giving you and sending you these strong urges and signals to breathe. But we are looking to extend this period spent in hypoxia. So when you get that urge to breathe, when you get that signal to breathe, and your diaphragm will have a little jump, it will try to breathe in, but because you've closed off your epiglottis, it won't be able to. You simply allow a sip of air to come in. And it will release the pressure and allow you to extend the breath hold for a moment without yet topping off the oxygen. So each time as these pressures start to build and as these contractions start to happen, you simply press the release valve by holding the breath, and you'll be able to extend the breath hold to up to 2, 3, and even minutes, and even longer with a little bit of practice. Okay? Then moving forward, once you've completed that breath in and you've taken a big, deep, full lung full of air, right? We apply a little bit of pressure to the chest, which is called a hook breath, right? We simply squeeze the muscles around our thoracic cavity. And this is a technique that's been used since the Second World War, when fighter pilots were trying to contend with the G-forces and the blood was pulling away from their brains, and they would learn to take big breaths in and squeeze the air. Freedivers use it too, right? After coming up from a long period without breathing, going down to the depths of the ocean and then getting just one breath to circulate as much oxygen through their system, they will take a breath in and apply squeeze. And so we use the same technique. A light pressure. And this is also when you'll feel a selection of endorphins running through your system, right? Your brain gets a vital rush of oxygen and it rewards you for that. And so you'll feel a great sense of ease and a profound release of energy flushing through your system as you exhale, and let your breathing stabilize, which will take a breath or two. But what we'll observe is that the breathing pattern will then fall shorter and calmer and lower. And that's ultimately what we're looking for, is a low and slow rhythm of breathing. So one more thing I'd like to point out along the way is your heart rate. And your heart rate will change the moment you change your breathing. It's the first responder, right? There's one particular point that we find quite interesting. And again, it's easy to measure your heart rate. You can also track it with a watch or a different biofeedback tool, or even just feel your pulse. And what you'll notice is that the heart rate will sort of drop and fall as your breathing does. But towards the end of the exercise, right, when we release this flowing breath, when we experience the release, your heart rate will consistently sit about 10 beats lower than it did at the beginning. And this is indicative of a state of relaxation, right? We've seen tests with people doing these deep breathing exercises that their vagal tone, which is another measurement of nervous system activity, particularly of the parasympathetic branch, the rest and digest side of the nervous system, will increase by 700% in just one 15-minute session of deep breathing, right? Again, these are all measurements that tell us that towards the end, the body will reach a state of deep relaxation, and the breathing will follow suit. So one of the amazing things about this technique is that it is very available to everyone, right? Even people that are not particularly good meditators or even have a hard time sitting still. It is a applied meditation technique. It is breath work. You can work your way into a state of relaxation. And I don't know about you, but personally, when I tried to meditate in the early days, it was always like I was talking myself into not talking, right? I was using my head to try and get out of my head, and it didn't really work a lot of the time with different apps and people talking about the clouds and da-da-da-da-da. Whereas with this, regardless of the state I am in, regardless of how much the pressures of life are starting to weigh down on me and the stress builds up, I can breathe deep and I can apply myself to it, and I can meet my body, my state, where it's set, and it will always experience that drop towards the end. So keeping some of these data points in mind, now that you know what happens throughout the breathwork exercise, what are some of the particular points that we can watch, right, that we can become aware of? But also, how can we track some of the progressions in this process and have some fun with it? I've marked a few for you along the way. And these are some of the particular points that you can measure yourself, right, at home when going through the exercise, and you can learn to get some different feedbacks about how your body is responding. First of all, we are becoming interested in the extremes of oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the deep breathing phase, right? And that really is the essence of this exercise, is you are taking your body, you are taking your very physiology, right? The language that your cells speak of, you know, your pH levels and the oxygen levels and the carbon dioxide levels and your heart rate and even your blood glucose levels. These are all vital points of information that your body is constantly relaying. And by changing your breathing, you are changing every single one of those markers. Amazing. So we're looking for how much carbon dioxide can you blow off in that initial phase. And it isn't necessarily a race, but this will determine how strongly the oxygen will bind to the blood in the system. And what you will notice is that when you wear your pulse oximeter, the oxygen reading will always be between 95 and 98. And one way to get a measurement of whether you have, you know, blown off actual carbon dioxide and you've been breathing deeper than you normally do, is that that reading will go up to 99 and then to 100. At which point you've sufficiently blown off the carbon dioxide and you can go into the breath hold phase. Next up is the breath hold time in total. So this can be quite fun to measure. And in the first week of practicing this exercise, you'll notice quite some progressions within this, right? You'll notice that your breath hold times get longer and they also start feeling easier. And how long you can hold your breath is actually an amazing insight, right? It's one of those superhuman tools that we have available to us that gives us very quick feedback on what's going on. Try holding your breath for comfortably after having an argument with your partner, right? Or after eating some very inflammatory foods the night before, or taking a bunch of stimulants, or, you know, binging a bit on the weekend. These are all things that will influence your breath hold. So rather than getting obsessed about it, just notice and just become aware about what are some of the particular triggers that influence my breath hold for the better or for the worse. What you will notice is that you'll reach some plateaus pretty quickly and your breath hold times will stop increasing. And this is neither good nor bad. Also, if your breath hold times start to decrease, this can be some interesting feedback from your body telling you that you might be overdoing the exercise. Because we're stressing the body at this very vital point, right? We're really playing with the language that our cells speak. We gotta be careful. It is a positive stressor used as an intervention. It's not necessarily something that you do every single day or multiple times a day, right? And when your body starts to give you some of these feedback points, one of which can be that your breath hold times start to decrease, you may have overdone it. And it can be good to just step down a bit, go back to doing it once a week, or even take a bit of time off, and you'll find that the benefits come back very quickly. Now, another data point is quite interesting, is to become aware of how quickly does our body drop into the anaerobic zone, right? Where our cells no longer have oxygen available and they start to process other vital resources for our metabolism, and lactate starts to get produced and the pH buffer starts to change, which is all quite amazing. It's essentially as if you're taking your body through a HIIT exercise just by doing a breathing technique, right? So an incredible way to maintain fitness, an amazing way to sort of get the benefits of exercise without having to put the stress on your musculoskeletal system. So we're interested in this particular drop that happens in the middle here. So how long does it take for your body to get oxygen available again and start processing it? In other words, when does that 100% measure that you're reading of the oxygen levels start to drop, right? And then also, how low does it drop, right? So how far can you find these extremes? Can you get all the way down? Can you go to Mount Everest, right? Maybe Mount Kilimanjaro up at like 60, 70%, or maybe just Mount Kosciuszko, which is our Australian equivalent, at 2000 meters, which you'll reach by going to about 90 or 85% oxygen levels, which is still quite significant and considered severe hypoxia. Last but not least, as you're holding the breath and as you're pushing your breath hold out, what is the maximum heart rate that you can reach? Again, we're going through the fluctuations here, and then we're also interested in what is the lowest heart rate you can reach, right? Really pushing these extremes, and sometimes you can get a heart rate that's up to 50 beats higher than resting or even more. And then what we're really looking for as a beautiful feedback point is towards the end of the exercise, can you find your heart rate lower than it was at the start? And if you do, you'll find that the exercise has had a relaxation effect on your body. And this is ultimately what we're looking for. And if you ask me, the most important point of feedback will actually come from you just simply checking in with yourself, checking in with your breathing and asking yourself, have I experienced the release that I promised you earlier? And if you did, you've done an amazing job. Now, before we get too far caught up in the science, let's go and actually experience the technique. And if you want to learn further, if you want to experience more, and if you're interested in the science, I've got a much deeper overview of this waiting for you in the Advanced Learning portal. So I hope to see you there, and I hope that you get something out of this lecture today and also out of this exercise.